The zip ties cut into Dante Kade's wrists. His shoulders pressed back against the concrete pillar, hands locked behind him like some common street thug waiting for execution. Except Dante didn't look like prey. Even with industrial restraints biting into his skin, even with 6 armed men forming a half-circle around him in the underground parking garage, he stood tall, chin up, eyes cold, breathing steady. The fluorescent lights above buzzed and flickered, casting shadows that stretched across all stained concrete. The air smelled like exhaust fumes and damp metal. Somewhere in the distance, a car alarm wailed before cutting off abruptly. Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Dante's dress shirt was wrinkled, stained with grime along the collar. His jaw was tight, but his face showed nothing. No fear, no anger, just that unnerving calm that made dangerous men nervous. The 6 attackers weren't amateurs. They moved with the precision of trained muscle, black tactical gear, holstered weapons, eyes that tracked every shift in Dante's posture. They'd coordinated this ambush down to the second, timing it perfectly when Dante's usual security detail was thin. But something felt wrong. Dante wasn't fighting back, wasn't yelling, wasn't even sweating. He just waited. The leader stepped forward, Harlan Greaves, mid-40s, scarred knuckles, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He'd worked for Dante once, 5 years ago, running enforcement in the South District until Dante caught him skimming profits and threatening an Omega worker who refused to cooperate. Dante didn't just fire him, he exiled him, blacklisted him from every crew in the city. Harlan never forgot that humiliation. Now he stood 3 feet from Dante, rolling his shoulders like a boxer before a fight. "You look confused," Harlan said, voice echoing off concrete, "like you're wondering how this happened." Dante said nothing. "No backup, no guards, no escape." Harlan tilted his head. "Your whole empire built on fear, and it ends here, in a parking garage, tied up like an animal." One of the men, tall, shaved head, dead eyes, stepped forward and shoved Dante's shoulder hard. The kind of shove meant to make someone stumble, to break their composure. Dante didn't move. Not even a flinch. The man frowned and shoved again, harder this time. Still nothing. Harlan's smile faltered for half a second, because this wasn't how it was supposed to go. Dante was supposed to beg, supposed to crack, supposed to show some sign that he understood the gravity of being outnumbered and defenseless. Instead, Dante looked at Harlan like he was watching a child throw a tantrum. "You're wasting time," Dante said quietly. Harlan's face twisted. He grabbed a fistful of Dante's shirt and yanked him forward, their faces inches apart. "You think you're untouchable. You think your name still means something." Dante's eyes didn't leave his. "I think," Dante said slowly, "you brought 6 men because you're scared of one." The words hung in the air like smoke. 2 of the attackers shifted their weight. One glanced at Harlan, then back at Dante. The tension in the garage thickened, pressing down like humidity before a storm. Harlan let go of Dante's shirt and stepped back, breathing hard through his nose. He turned to his crew and snapped his fingers twice. "Bring him out." The men parted. And from behind one of the concrete pillars, slow and trembling, someone stepped into the light. A pregnant Omega. Male, mid-20s, dark hoodie stretched tight over the curve of his belly. His hands clutched the fabric like it might protect him from what was coming. His hair fell across his forehead in messy waves, and his breath came in shallow gasps, like he'd been crying or running or both. His scent hit the air, faint, sweet, stressed. Dante's entire body went rigid. For the first time all night, something flickered behind that mask of control. Recognition. The Omega's name was Riven Hale. And Dante knew him. The Omega lifted his head slowly, eyes wet and red-rimmed, and met Dante's gaze. Riven's lips parted like he wanted to say something, like he was trying to apologize without words. Harlan watched the exchange with a grin spreading across his face. "Recognize him, boss, of course you do." Dante said nothing, but his jaw clenched so tight a muscle jumped in his cheek. Harlan stepped closer to Riven, close enough to make the Omega flinch. "He used to belong to your enemy, Caspian Vale's little widow. Thought we'd bring him along, since you care so much about protecting Omegas." Riven's hands shook. Dante's eyes stayed locked on him. And then Harlan said the words that made the air freeze. "Tell him the truth, Riven." Riven's breath hitched. "Tell him what you came here to do." The Omega's voice cracked when he spoke, barely louder than a whisper. I brought them to you. Do you think Dante saw this coming, or is he about to lose everything he's built? Riven's words echoed in the garage like a death sentence. The 6 men shifted, satisfied. One of them barked out a short laugh. Another muttered something under his breath that sounded like knew it. Harlan's grin stretched wider. Your precious alpha got played, by an Omega carrying his enemy's pup. Riven's entire body trembled. He pressed one hand against his belly, protective, instinctive. The other hand hung limp at his side, fingers twitching like he wanted to reach for something or someone, but couldn't. Dante stared at him, not with anger, not with betrayal. Just studying. Like he was reading a book written in a language only he understood. Why? Dante asked. That single word hit harder than any accusation. Riven flinched like he'd been slapped. His eyes filled with fresh tears and he looked away, unable to hold Dante's gaze. Harlan stepped between them, blocking the line of sight. Why? Because he's smart. Because he knows survival matters more than loyalty. Because... I wasn't asking you. Dante's voice cut through Harlan's like a blade. The garage went silent. Even the distant hum of traffic above seemed to fade. Harlan's smile tightened. He turned back to Riven and grabbed the Omega's arm, yanking him forward. Tell him what they promised you if you didn't cooperate. Riven's breath came in short, panicked bursts. His sense spiked, fear mixed with exhaustion and something deeper, desperation. Riven's voice broke. He swallowed hard and tried again. They said they'd take him. Take who? One of the men asked, confused. Riven pressed his hand harder against his belly. My baby. The words landed like stones. Dante's eyes darkened, not with rage, with something colder, sharper. Harlan laughed. That's right. We told him if he didn't bring you to us, we'd cut the pup out of him the second it was born. And you know what? He believed us. Riven turned his face away, shame radiating off him in waves. Because he's seen what men like us do to Omegas who don't obey, Harlan continued, enjoying every second. He's seen it firsthand, so when we came knocking, he didn't have a choice. Dante's jaw worked, his wrists flexed against the zip ties, testing their strength. Everyone has a choice, Dante said quietly. Riven's head snapped up. His eyes were bloodshot, filled with hurt and fury. Easy for you to say when you're not the one carrying a life inside you. Dante didn't respond. Riven's voice rose, cracking with emotion. They followed me for months. They showed up at my apartment. They sent pictures of my ultrasounds. They knew everywhere I went, every doctor's visit, every grocery store trip. His breath hitched. They said if I ran, they'd find me. If I fought, they'd kill me. And if I didn't give them what they wanted. He couldn't finish. Harlan stepped closer to Riven, placing a hand on the Omega's shoulder in a mockery of comfort. He made the smart choice, self-preservation. Can't blame him for that. Dante's eyes stayed on Riven's face. You're scared. It wasn't a question. Riven's composure shattered. He covered his face with one hand, shoulders shaking. Harlan's expression twisted with irritation. Stop acting like you care. You didn't bring 6 men here because you're brave, Dante said, cutting him off. You brought a pregnant Omega because you're a coward. The statement hung in the air like smoke. One of the attackers shifted uneasily. Another glanced at Harlan, then back at Dante. Because Harlan wasn't just vengeful, he was careless, and when men sense weakness in a leader, they start calculating. Harlan's face flushed red. He stepped forward and grabbed Riven's arm again, harder this time. Don't listen to him, he's trying to. Riven jerked his arm back. The motion was instinctive, defensive. And when he pulled away, something fell from his sleeve. A small object clattered onto the concrete floor. A ring, gold engraved. Everyone's eyes dropped to it. Dante's gaze locked onto the ring like it was the only thing in the world. The crest etched into the metal was unmistakable. Caspian Vale's family crest. Riven stared at the ring, frozen. Harlan's smile returned, slow and cruel. Ah, there it is. He crouched down and picked up the ring, holding it up to the light. Caspian Vale, your dead rival, the man who tried to take over your territory 3 years ago. He glanced at Dante. You remember him, don't you? Dante said nothing. Harlan turned the ring over in his fingers. Caspian died in a car accident. Tragic, unexpected. He paused, or so everyone thought. Riven's breathing grew faster. Harlan stood and walked toward Dante, holding the ring between his thumb and forefinger. But here's the thing, boss. Caspian wasn't just running from you that night. He was running from a lot of people. People he owed, people he betrayed. He stopped inches from Dante's face. And now his widow is carrying the only thing those people want. Dante's eyes flicked to Riven. The Omega looked small, fragile, terrified. Harlan leaned in close and whispered, "This isn't about killing you, Dante. It's about taking everything you thought you could protect." He straightened and tossed the ring at Dante's feet. Then he turned to Riven and said, voice dripping with false kindness, "Why don't you tell him the rest?" Riven's face went pale. What secret is Riven still hiding, and why does Harlan look so satisfied? Riven's lips trembled. He opened his mouth twice before any sound came out. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible. Caspian didn't die in an accident. The words hit like a confession. Dante didn't react, didn't blink, just watched. Riven wrapped both arms around his belly, protective and desperate. He was running from debts, from enemies, from people he promised things to and never delivered. His voice cracked. "He told me the night before. He said if anything happened to him, I had to disappear. I had to protect the baby." One of the men shifted behind Harlan, uncomfortable. "So I did," Riven continued, voice shaking. "I left everything, changed my name, stayed off the grid. For 2 years I thought I was safe." Harlan chuckled, "But you weren't." Riven flinched. "Because Caspian didn't just owe money," Harlan said, circling Riven like a predator. "He owed information, secrets, locations of shipments, names of people in power." He stopped and looked at Dante, and he locked all of it behind one key. He pointed at Riven's belly. "Bloodline verification." The garage went silent. Dante's eyes narrowed. "What are you talking about?" Harlan grinned. Caspian was smarter than people gave him credit for. He knew if he died, people would come looking for his assets, so he encoded access to his offshore accounts and encrypted files. With a DNA lock, only his direct bloodline can unlock it. He gestured to Riven. "And right now, that bloodline is sitting in his belly." Riven's hands shook so hard, he could barely hold himself upright. Dante's voice turned deadly quiet. "You're saying the baby is a key?" "Exactly," Harlan's smile widened. "Once that pup is born, anyone with access to its DNA can unlock everything Caspian hid. Money, secrets, leverage, enough to control half the underground in this city." One of the men behind Harlan spoke up for the first time. "That's why we need him alive." Riven's breath came in short, panicked gasps. Dante's gaze shifted back to him. "How long have you known?" Riven looked up, eyes red. "Since the first ultrasound. Caspian told me before he died. He said if anyone ever came looking for the baby, I should run, I should never stop running." "But you stopped," Dante said. Riven's face crumpled. "I didn't have a choice." "There's always a choice," Dante repeated, voice hard. "Not when they find you in the middle of the night," Riven shouted, voice cracking with desperation. "Not when they show you pictures of your baby on an ultrasound screen and tell you exactly how they'll cut him out if you don't cooperate." The garage fell silent again. Riven's chest heaved, tears streamed down his face. "They said if I brought you here, if I gave them what they wanted, they'd let me go, they'd let my baby live." His voice broke. "I didn't know what else to do." Dante's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes softened, just for a second. Harlan clapped his hands together, breaking the moment. "Touching, really, but let's move this along." He pulled a gun from his waistband and checked the chamber casually. Riven's eyes went wide. "Now," Harlan said, turning the gun over in his hand, "here's how this is going to work. You," he pointed the gun at Riven, "are coming with us. We'll keep you comfortable, fed, safe, until that pup is born." Riven backed up a step, hands raised. "And you," Harlan pointed the gun at Dante, "are going to watch, because I don't just want you dead, boss. I want you broken first." Dante's jaw clenched. Harlan stepped closer to Riven, who was now pressed against a concrete pillar, shaking. "Don't touch him," Dante said, voice low. Harlan laughed. "Or what?" He reached out and grabbed Riven's wrist. Riven yanked back, but Harlan's grip tightened. "Let him go," Dante said again, louder this time. Harlan ignored him. He pulled Riven forward, fingers digging into the Omega's arm hard enough to leave marks. Riven cried out in pain, and Dante's entire body went rigid. For the first time all night, real fury flashed across his face. Not controlled, not restrained, raw. Harlan saw it and smiled wider. There it is, there's the real Dante Kade. He yanked Riven closer, forcing the Omega to his knees. Riven gasped, one hand pressed against his belly. And then Harlan did something unforgivable. He placed his boot on Riven's shoulder and shoved him to the ground. Riven hit the concrete hard, crying out as his body twisted to protect his stomach. Dante lunged forward, zip ties cutting deep into his wrists, but he didn't care. He moved with the kind of rage that made the air itself feel dangerous. One of the men stepped forward and slammed the butt of his gun into Dante's ribs. Dante grunted but didn't stop. Another man hit him across the face. Still, Dante kept moving. It took 3 of them to force him back against the pillar. Harlan crouched next to Riven, who was curled on the ground, shaking. "See that, Riven? That's what happens when you trust alphas. They can't even protect you when it matters." Riven's breath came in ragged sobs. Harlan stood and turned back to Dante, who was breathing hard, blood trickling from his split lip. "You want to save him?" Harlan asked, "then beg." Dante's eyes burned with hatred. "Beg me to let him go, and maybe, I'll be merciful." The men around him waited. Dante said nothing. Harlan sighed dramatically, shame. He turned back to Riven and grabbed a fistful of his hair, yanking his head back. Riven cried out, tears streaming down his face. And then Harlan said something that made the entire situation explode. "You know what, I think we'll just take the baby now." Will Dante break, or does he have one final move left? Harlan's words echoed in the garage like a death sentence. Riven's entire body went rigid. His hands flew to his belly, protective and desperate. "No, please." "Relax," Harlan said, voice mocking. "We're not animals. We'll wait until he's viable. A few more weeks, maybe a month, then we'll induce labor. Clean, professional." Riven's breathing turned shallow, panicked. "Of course," Harlan continued, "if you don't cooperate, we can always do it the hard way." One of the men, a stocky guy with a scarred jaw, stepped forward. He cracked his knuckles and looked at Riven like he was livestock. "Let me handle it, boss," the man said. "Omegas break easy when you know where to press." Harlan considered this, then nodded. "Go ahead, show him what happens to people who waste our time." The man stepped toward Riven. Riven scrambled backward, pressing himself against the concrete pillar. Don't touch me." The man grabbed Riven's ankle and dragged him forward. Riven screamed, and Dante's voice cut through the air like a whip. "Stop." The word was quiet, calm, but it carried weight. The man paused, glancing at Harlan. Harlan laughed. "Or what, Dante? You'll glare at us harder." Dante didn't respond. His eyes were locked on the man holding Riven's ankle, and something about that stare, cold, calculating, dangerous, made the man hesitate. "Let him go," Dante said again. The man looked at Harlan for confirmation. Harlan waved his hand dismissively. "Ignore him, he's tied up, he can't do anything." The man nodded and tightened his grip on Riven's ankle. Riven thrashed, trying to pull free. "Please, don't." The man reached for Riven's belly. And Dante moved. Even with his hands zip-tied behind his back, even outnumbered, Dante launched himself forward with terrifying speed. He slammed his shoulder into the nearest attacker, driving him into the concrete pillar with enough force to crack bone. The man crumpled. Harlan's smile vanished. "Grab him." 2 more men rushed Dante. Dante twisted, using his body weight to throw one off balance. The man stumbled, and Dante drove his knee into his ribs. Hard. The second man swung a baton at Dante's head. Dante ducked and headbutted him in the face. Blood sprayed. The man dropped. but the remaining 3 closed in fast, surrounding him. One tackled Dante from behind, driving him to his knees. Another kicked him in the stomach. Dante grunted but didn't cry out. Harlan stepped forward furious, hold him down. They forced Dante onto his stomach, pressing his face into the concrete. One man put a knee on his back, another pressed a gun to his temple. Dante's breathing was labored, but his eyes stayed sharp, focused. Harlan crouched next to him, voice low and venomous. "You really thought you could stop this?" Dante said nothing. Harlan stood and turned back to Riven, who was still pressed against the pillar, shaking. "Where were we?" Harlan said, voice light. "Oh right, the baby." He gestured to the stocky man, who stepped forward again. Riven's eyes went wide. "No." The man reached out and placed his hand on Riven's belly. Riven flinched, tears streaming down his face. The man pressed harder, fingers digging into the curve of Riven's stomach. "Feels solid, strong, he'll survive the extraction." Riven sobbed, trying to pull away, but the man held him in place. And then something happened. The baby kicked. Hard. Riven gasped, one hand flying to his side. The man frowned. "What?" Riven's face twisted in pain. He doubled over, breathing hard. And then blood appeared. A thin line of red, soaking through his hoodie near his hip. Everyone froze. Harlan's smile faltered. "What the hell?" Riven's legs buckled. He collapsed onto his knees, one hand pressed against his side where the blood was spreading. "I'm bleeding," Riven whispered, voice shaking. "I'm bleeding." One of the men stepped back, looking uncomfortable. "Boss, if the baby—" "Shut up," Harlan snapped. But even he looked uncertain now. Because if the baby died, so did their leverage. Riven's breathing turned ragged. He looked up at Dante, eyes filled with terror. And Dante, still pinned to the ground with a gun to his head, met his gaze. For the first time all night, Dante's expression shifted. Not fear, not panic. Something else. Resolve. Riven's lips moved, barely audible, but Dante saw the words. "Do it now." Dante's eyes flicked upward. Just for a second. And then he exhaled. The garage speakers crackled. Everyone froze. Static filled the air for a moment, followed by a voice, calm, professional, emotionless. "Boss, we're live." What just happened, and who's been watching this entire time? The lights exploded. Not literally, but the overhead fluorescence blazed brighter, flooding the garage with harsh white light that made everyone squint. Harlan spun around, eyes wide. What the? Shadows moved. Not one, not two. Dozens. They emerged from behind cars, from behind pillars, from the stairwell entrance at the far end of the garage. Armed, silent, coordinated. Dante's people. They'd been there the entire time. Harlan's face went pale. No, that's not possible. "You thought I came alone." Dante's voice was calm despite the gun still pressed to his temple. "You thought I didn't know this was a trap." The man holding Dante hesitated, looking at Harlan for orders. Harlan's hands shook. Shoot him now." But the man didn't move. Because 20 guns were now trained on him. Dante shifted his weight slightly, testing the grip of the man holding him down. "I let you bring me here. I let you tie me up. I let you bring Riven." Harlan's breath came fast. Why would you?" "Because I needed to know who else was involved," Dante said. "I needed to see who would come, who would betray me, who would take the bait." He turned his head just enough to look at Harlan. "And now I know." Harlan backed up a step, then another. His eyes darted around the garage, looking for an exit. There wasn't one. Dante's crew had sealed every entrance. "You're surrounded," Dante said quietly. "Put down your weapons." One of Harlan's men dropped his gun immediately, hands raised. Another followed. The third looked at Harlan, conflicted. Harlan grabbed him by the collar. "Don't you dare." The man shoved him off and dropped his weapon. Within seconds, all of Harlan's crew had surrendered. Except Harlan. He stood in the center of the garage, breathing hard, eyes wild. Dante's people closed in slowly, weapons raised but not firing. And then one of them stepped forward, a tall woman with short-cropped hair and cold eyes. She pulled a knife from her belt and cut the zip ties on Dante's wrists with one clean motion. Dante stood slowly, rolling his shoulders. His wrists were raw, bleeding where the restraints had cut into skin, but he didn't seem to notice. His eyes stayed locked on Harlan. "It's over," Dante said. Harlan's face twisted with rage. No, it's not." He lunged. Not at Dante. At Riven. Riven was still on his knees, one hand pressed against his bleeding side. He looked up just in time to see Harlan running toward him. Dante moved faster. He crossed the distance in 3 strides and drove his fist into Harlan's face with the full force of his rage. Harlan's head snapped back, blood sprayed from his nose. He stumbled but didn't fall. Dante hit him again, harder. This time Harlan went down, crashing onto the concrete. Dante stood over him, breathing hard. "You threatened an Omega." Harlan wheezed, blood pouring from his nose and mouth. "He's not yours." Dante crouched down, grabbed Harlan by the collar, and pulled him up just enough to meet his eyes. "He's not property." Then Dante slammed Harlan's head into the concrete. Once, twice, 3 times. The sound echoed through the garage like gunshots. When Dante finally let go, Harlan didn't move. He lay on the ground, face ruined, breathing shallow. Not dead, but broken. Dante stood and turned to Riven. The Omega was still on his knees, shaking. His hoodie was soaked with blood and his face was pale. Dante walked over slowly, carefully, like approaching something fragile. Riven looked up at him, eyes filled with tears. "I'm sorry." Dante knelt in front of him. "You were forced." "I still did it," Riven's voice cracked. "I still brought them to you." "And you still survived." Dante's voice was gentle. "That makes you stronger than any of them." Riven broke. He covered his face with both hands and sobbed, shoulders shaking. Dante reached out and placed one hand on Riven's shoulder, steadying him. His other hand hovered near Riven's back, careful not to press against his belly. "I don't know how to protect him," Riven whispered. Dante's answer was immediate. "You won't do it alone." Riven looked up, eyes red and swollen. And for the first time in months, he saw something he didn't expect. "Safety." Dante stood and gestured to the woman who'd cut his restraints. "Get him to the hospital. Now, make sure the medical team is ready." The woman nodded and moved toward Riven. But before she could reach him, Riven's eyes rolled back. His body went limp. Dante caught him before he hit the ground. "Riven," Dante's voice was sharp. "Stay with me." Riven's breathing was shallow, his pulse weak. "The baby." Dante's jaw clenched. He lifted Riven carefully into his arms and started moving toward the exit. "Clear a path," he barked. His crew moved instantly, forming a corridor. Dante carried Riven through the garage, past the defeated attackers, past Harlan's broken body. And as he reached the stairwell, one thought burned through his mind. This wasn't over. Not yet. Because someone else had been pulling the strings. Someone bigger than Harlan. And they were still out there. Who's really behind this, and will Riven's baby survive? The hospital doors burst open. Dante carried Riven through the emergency entrance like the building itself was on fire. Blood soaked through Riven's hoodie, dripping onto the white tile floor in a trail of red droplets. Nurses looked up, eyes wide, and immediately sprang into action. "Pregnant Omega bleeding, possible placental abruption," Dante said, voice sharp and controlled. "Get a team, now." 2 nurses rushed forward with a gurney. Dante laid Riven down carefully, one hand supporting his head, the other steadying his back. Riven's eyes fluttered open, unfocused, confused. "Stay with me," Dante said, leaning close. "You're safe now." Riven's lips moved, but no sound came out. The medical team wheeled him away fast, disappearing through double doors marked emergency surgery. Dante stood in the empty hallway, hands still stained with blood. His chest rose and fell with controlled breaths. His jaw was tight. Behind him, the woman from the garage, Kiana, stepped through the entrance, phone pressed to her ear. She ended the call and approached. Boss, we've secured the garage. All 6 men are in custody. Harlan's alive, barely. Dante didn't turn around. Good. What do you want us to do with him? Keep him breathing. I'm not done with him yet. Kiana nodded, and the others. Find out who they've been talking to, who hired them, who's been feeding them information. Dante's voice dropped lower. Someone bigger is behind this. Harlan's too stupid to plan this alone. Kiana hesitated. Boss, there's something else. Dante turned his head slightly. One of Harlan's men started talking the second we put pressure on him. Said Harlan had a partner, someone inside your operation. Dante's entire body went still. Who? He didn't know the name, but he said Harlan's been getting intel for months. Security routes, meeting locations, safe houses. Kiana's voice tightened. Someone's been feeding him everything. Dante's hands curled into fists. How many people know about tonight? Inner circle only, maybe 10 people. Narrow it down to 5. Run background checks on everyone. Bank records, communications, everything. Kiana nodded and pulled out her phone. Dante walked to the waiting area and sat down in one of the plastic chairs. His elbows rested on his knees, hands clasped together. He stared at the blood on his knuckles. An hour passed. Then 2. Finally, a doctor emerged from the surgery wing. A black woman in her 50s, calm and composed. She approached Dante directly. Mr. Kade. Dante stood. How is he? Stable. The bleeding was caused by stress and physical trauma, but the baby's vitals are strong. We've given him fluids and monitored the fetal heartbeat. Both are doing well. Dante exhaled slowly. Can I see him? He's resting, but yes, room 304. Dante walked past her without another word. He found Riven's room at the end of a quiet hallway. The door was cracked open. Inside, the lights were dimmed. Riven lay in the hospital bed, an IV in his arm, monitors beeping softly beside him. His eyes were closed, his breathing steady. Dante stepped inside and stood at the foot of the bed, watching. Riven's hand rested on his belly, protective even in sleep. Dante's chest tightened. He pulled a chair close and sat down, elbows on his knees, gaze never leaving Riven's face. Minutes passed in silence. Then Riven stirred, his eyelids fluttered open slowly. He blinked, disoriented, then turned his head and saw Dante. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Riven's voice came out hoarse. You didn't leave. No. Riven looked away. You should have. Why? Because I betrayed you. Riven's voice cracked. I brought them to you. I let them. You survived, Dante interrupted. That's all that matters. Riven's eyes filled with tears. I don't deserve. Stop, Dante's voice was firm but not harsh. You were protecting your child. There's no shame in that. Riven pressed his lips together, fighting to hold back a sob. Dante leaned forward slightly. Harlan's alive, and he's going to tell me everything. Riven's eyes widened. You're going back? Yes. He'll kill you. He'll try. Riven shook his head. You don't understand. He's not working alone. He told me. Riven stopped, breath catching. Told you what? Riven hesitated, then quietly. He said someone on your team set this up, someone close to you. Dante's expression didn't change, but his eyes darkened. Who? I don't know, he wouldn't say. Riven's voice dropped to a whisper, but he said when the time came, they'd finish what he started. The room went cold. Dante stood slowly. I'll handle it. He turned toward the door. Dante. He stopped. Riven's voice was small, scared. Please don't get yourself killed. Dante looked back at him, their eyes met. I won't. Then he walked out. In the hallway, Kiana was waiting. She held up her phone. Boss, we found something. What? Financial records. One of your lieutenants, Jamal Cross, made 3 wire transfers in the last 2 months, all to offshore accounts tied to Harlan. Dante's jaw clenched. Where is he? We're tracking him now. He left the city an hour ago. Find him, bring him back alive. Kiana nodded and walked away, already dialing. Dante stood in the hallway, fists clenched at his sides. Jamal Cross had been with him for 5 years, trusted, loyal. Or so he thought. But betrayal always comes from the people closest to you. And now Dante had a choice. Mercy or justice? He chose justice. Who is Jamal Cross, and what will Dante do when he finds him? The warehouse smelled like rust and gasoline. Dante walked through the wide metal doors, footsteps echoing on concrete. The space was empty except for a single chair in the center, metal and bolted to the floor. Jamal Cross sat in that chair, hands zip-tied behind his back, face bruised and swollen. Blood dripped from his split lip onto his shirt. 2 of Dante's enforcers stood on either side of him, arms crossed, silent. Dante approached slowly, his hands were in his pockets, his expression was unreadable. Jamal looked up, eyes bloodshot. Dante. Dante backhanded him across the face. The sound cracked through the warehouse like a whip. Jamal's head snapped to the side, he spat blood onto the floor. "Don't speak," Dante said quietly, "not yet." Jamal's chest heaved, he kept his eyes down. Dante circled the chair, hands still in his pockets. 5 years, you worked for me for 5 years. Jamal said nothing. I promoted you, trusted you, brought you into my inner circle. Dante stopped in front of him, and you sold me out. It wasn't like that. Dante grabbed Jamal by the throat and lifted him off the chair. The zip ties strained but didn't break. You gave Harlan my location, my schedules, my safe houses. Dante's voice was low, lethal. You put a pregnant Omega in danger, you almost got him killed. Jamal's face turned red, he gasped for air. Dante held him there for 3 more seconds, then let go. Jamal collapsed back into the chair, coughing and wheezing. Why? Dante asked. Jamal didn't answer at first. Then slowly he lifted his head. Because you don't care about us. You care about power, about control, about your reputation. Dante's eyes narrowed. Harlan offered me something you never did, Jamal continued, voice bitter. A way out, a chance to be my own boss instead of living in your shadow. So you betrayed everyone. I did what I had to do. Dante stared at him for a long moment, then he pulled a knife from his belt. Jamal's eyes went wide. Wait. Dante cut the zip ties. Jamal's hands fell free, he rubbed his wrists, confused. Stand up, Dante said. Jamal hesitated, then stood slowly. Dante handed him the knife. Jamal stared at it. What? You said you wanted to be your own boss, Dante said. So here's your chance. Fight me, kill me, take everything. Jamal looked at the knife, then at Dante. This is a trick. No trick. If you win, you walk out of here. If I win, Dante's voice turned cold. You don't. Jamal's hand shook, he gripped the knife tighter. For a moment, he just stood there. Then he lunged. Dante sidestepped easily. He grabbed Jamal's wrist, twisted it, and slammed him face first into the concrete. The knife clattered away. Jamal groaned, dazed. Dante picked up the knife and crouched next to him. You were never my equal. You were never strong enough to lead, and you'll never be anything more than a coward who sold out the people who trusted him. Jamal turned his head, blood pouring from his nose. You're going to kill me. No, Dante stood. I'm going to let you live, because death is too easy. He gestured to the enforcers. Take him to the police. Anonymous tip. Let them find the evidence linking him to Harlan's operation. Jamal's eyes widened. You can't. You'll spend the rest of your life in prison, and every day you'll remember that you did this to yourself. The enforcers dragged Jamal out, his screams echoing through the warehouse. Dante stood alone, knife still in his hand. Then his phone buzzed. A text from Kiana. Hospital now, it's Riven. Dante's blood ran cold. He was out the door before the message even finished loading. The drive took 12 minutes, Dante made it in 8. He burst through the hospital entrance, ignoring the front desk, and took the stairs 2 at a time. Rooms 304. He shoved the door open. Riven was sitting up in bed, pale and shaking. A nurse stood next to him, checking his vitals. Dante crossed the room in 3 steps. What happened? Riven looked up at him, eyes wide. Someone was here. Dante's entire body went rigid. Who? I don't know. I woke up and saw someone standing in the doorway, just watching me. What did they look like? I couldn't see their face. They were wearing a hood, but they said something before they left. What did they say? Riven's voice dropped to a whisper. They said, "The baby doesn't belong to you." Dante's jaw clenched. He turned to the nurse. "Lock down this floor. No one gets in or out without clearance. I want security on every entrance." The nurse nodded and hurried out. Dante turned back to Riven. "Did they touch you?" "No, they just stood there, then they left." Dante pulled out his phone and called Kiana. "I need a full sweep of the hospital. Cameras, security footage, everything." "On it," Kiana said. Dante hung up and sat down on the edge of Riven's bed. "You're not leaving my sight, not until I know who's behind this." Riven looked at him, eyes filled with fear. "What if they come back?" Dante's voice was steady. "Then I'll be here." For the first time since the garage, Riven felt something he hadn't felt in months. Protected. But across the city, in a dark office with no windows, someone watched security footage of the hospital. They smiled and picked up the phone. "It's time, move to the final phase." Who's pulling the strings, and what's the final phase? The video played on repeat. Dante stood in Kiana's makeshift office, a repurposed storage room filled with laptops, monitors, and surveillance equipment. On the largest screen, grainy hospital footage showed a hooded figure entering Riven's room, standing at the foot of his bed for exactly 30 seconds, then leaving. No face visible, no identifying features. Ghost. Kiana froze the frame at the moment the figure turned toward the camera. We ran facial recognition. Nothing. Voice analysis from the hallway mic caught the threat, but it's been digitally altered, untraceable. Dante leaned closer to the screen. Height, build, gait, something. 5'10", average build, moves like someone with training, military maybe, or private security. Kiana pulled up another file. But here's the strange part. They bypassed 3 security checkpoints without triggering a single alarm. Hospital badge was cloned. Access codes were legitimate. Dante's eyes narrowed. Inside job. "Again," Kiana said grimly. Dante's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen. Unknown number. He answered, "Who is this?" A voice came through, distorted, mechanical. "You've been asking the wrong questions, Mr. Kade." Dante's jaw tightened. "Who are you?" "Someone who understands what Caspian Vale really was, and what his child represents." "If you touch Riven..." "I don't need to touch him. He'll bring the baby to me willingly." "You're insane." "Am I?" Caspian Vale didn't just hide money, Mr. Kade. He hid something far more valuable, and that Omega is carrying the only key to access it. Dante's grip on the phone tightened. "What are you talking about?" "Ask Riven about the last night he saw Caspian. Ask him what Caspian told him right before he died." The line went dead. Dante lowered the phone slowly. Kiana watched him. "Boss. We are missing something, something big." He turned and walked out. Back at the hospital, Dante entered Riven's room without knocking. Riven was awake, sitting up in bed, hands resting on his belly. He looked up as Dante entered. "Did you find them?" "No, but I need to ask you something." Riven's expression shifted, guarded. "What?" "The night Caspian died, what did he tell you?" Riven's face went pale. "Riven, I already told you. He said if anything happened to him, I should disappear, protect the baby." "That's not all he said." Riven looked away. Dante stepped closer. "Someone just called me, told me Caspian hid something, something more valuable than money, and you know what it is." Riven's hands shook. "Tell me." Riven's voice came out barely above a whisper. He said the baby was insurance. "Insurance for what?" "For leverage, for survival." Riven's eyes filled with tears. "Caspian wasn't just a businessman, Dante. He was a broker. He moved information, sold secrets to the highest bidder. Governments, corporations, criminal syndicates." Dante's expression darkened. And when he realized people were coming for him, he created a failsafe. Riven's voice broke. He encoded access to his entire network, every name, every transaction, every secret he ever sold, into a genetic lock. It's the baby. Riven nodded. The baby's DNA is the key. Once he's born, anyone with access to his blood can unlock everything Caspian hid, and there are people willing to kill for that access. Dante's mind raced. How many people know this? I don't know, Caspian never told me. He just said I had to keep the baby safe, that if the wrong people found out. Riven trailed off. Dante turned and walked to the window, staring out at the city lights. There's more, Riven said quietly. Dante turned back. Caspian told me if I ever felt like I couldn't protect the baby alone, there was one person I could trust. It's who? Riven looked at him. You. Dante's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes softened. He said you were the only person in the city who couldn't be bought, the only one who'd protect an Omega without asking for anything in return. Dante was silent for a long moment. Then his phone buzzed again. This time it was Kiana. Boss, we found something. You need to see this. Dante left the hospital and met Kiana at a warehouse on the edge of the industrial district. Inside, she led him to a wall covered in photographs, documents, and maps. This is what Harlan's been working on for the last 6 months, Kiana said. We pulled it from his encrypted files. Dante scanned the wall, photographs of Riven, medical records, ultrasound images, and in the center, a single name written in red marker. Project Bloodline. Kiana pointed to a document. Harlan wasn't working for a criminal syndicate. He was working for a private military contractor, Blackridge Securities. Dante's eyes narrowed. I know them. They provide security for government officials, defense contracts. Right, but they also run black ops, extraction, interrogation, asset recovery. Kiana tapped another document, and 6 months ago they put out a contract for Caspian Vale's genetic legacy. It's the baby. Exactly, they want to use the genetic lock to access Caspian's network, sell the information to the highest bidder. We're talking billions. Dante's jaw clenched. Where's their base of operations? Unknown, but we traced their last communication to a facility outside the city, abandoned pharmaceutical plant. Dante turned to her. Get a team, we move tonight. Kiana nodded. What about Riven? He stays at the hospital, full security detail, no one gets in or out. Kiana hesitated. Boss, there's one more thing. Dante looked at her. We found a mole. Dante's entire body went still. It's who? Kiana pulled up a file on her tablet. A photograph appeared. A black woman in her 30s, familiar face. Dr. Amara Hayes, the same doctor who treated Riven at the hospital. Dante's expression turned to stone. She's been feeding information to Blackridge since Riven was admitted, Kiana said. Medical records, security schedules, everything. Dante's hands curled into fists. Arrest her, now. Already done, she's in custody. Dante exhaled slowly. Good. He turned and walked toward the exit. But as he reached the door, Kiana called after him. Boss, Blackridge isn't going to stop. Even if we take down their facility, they'll keep coming. As long as that baby exists, Riven will never be safe. Dante stopped. He didn't turn around. I know. Then he walked out into the night. Back at the hospital, Riven lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. His hand rested on his belly. And for the first time, he allowed himself to hope. But miles away, in a sterile white room, a woman in a lab coat looked at a monitor, displaying Riven's medical file. She picked up a phone. Subject is stable, fetal heartbeat strong, estimated delivery in 4 weeks. A voice responded, prepare the extraction team. Understood. She hung up and smiled. What is Blackridge planning, and will Dante stop them in time? The facility was dark. Dante and his team moved through the abandoned pharmaceutical plant like shadows. 12 people, armed, silent, trained. They'd cut the power 2 minutes ago. Now the only light came from emergency exit signs, glowing red in the hallways. Dante led the group, handgun raised, eyes scanning every corner. Behind him, Kiana moved with equal precision, covering his flank. They reached a stairwell. Dante signaled for 2 operatives to clear the upper floors. The rest continued down. Basement level, heavy steel door at the end of the corridor. Dante approached slowly. He placed his hand on the door. Wham! Someone was inside. He looked back at Kiana. She nodded. Dante kicked the door open. The room inside was massive. Medical equipment lined the walls, computers, monitors, surgical tools laid out on metal trays. And in the center, a single hospital bed. Empty. Dante's eyes scanned the room, clear the space, find. A voice echoed from hidden speakers, looking for something, Mr. Kade. Dante froze. The lights flickered on, blinding white. And on the largest monitor, a face appeared, a white man in his 60s, sharp suit, cold eyes. My name is Richard Calloway, the man said, CEO of Blackridge Securities, and you've made a grave mistake coming here. Dante raised his gun toward the monitor. Where's your team? Calloway smiled. Gone, you're too late. Too late for what? The extraction. We're not waiting for the baby to be born, Mr. Kade. We're taking him now. Dante's blood ran cold. Riven. Kiana's phone buzzed. She looked at the screen and her face went white. Boss, hospital security just went dark. All cameras offline. Dante turned and ran. He sprinted through the facility, out the exit, into the parking lot. His car was already running. He threw himself into the driver's seat and floored the gas. The drive back to the city was a blur. Dante's phone rang. He answered. They're inside. Kiana's voice was panicked. 4th floor, Riven's floor, security's been neutralized. How many? 6, maybe more, full tactical gear. Dante's jaw clenched. I'm 2 minutes out. He ended the call and pressed the accelerator harder. The hospital appeared ahead. Dante didn't bother parking. He abandoned the car at the entrance and ran inside, gun drawn. Nurses screamed, patients scattered. Dante ignored them. He took the stairs 4 at a time, breath controlled, mind focused. 4th floor. The hallway was chaos. 2 security guards lay unconscious on the floor. A nurse was pressed against the wall, crying. Dante reached room 304. The door was open. Inside, Riven was on the bed, hands zip-tied to the railing. A man in black tactical gear stood over him, syringe in hand. Dante didn't hesitate. He fired twice. Both shots hit center mass. The man dropped. Riven screamed. Dante crossed the room and cut the restraints. Are you hurt? Riven shook his head, tears streaming down his face. They were going to. I know. Dante pulled him upright. Can you walk? I think so. Dante helped him to his feet. They moved toward the door. Then footsteps echoed in the hallway. Heavy, fast, multiple. Dante pushed Riven behind him and aimed at the doorway. 4 men in tactical gear rounded the corner, weapons raised. Dante fired first. 2 went down immediately. The 3rd ducked behind a gurney. The 4th returned fire. Bullets tore through the doorframe. Dante shielded Riven with his body, then fired back. The 3rd man dropped. The 4th retreated down the hallway. Dante didn't pursue. He turned to Riven. We need to move, now. They ran. Down the hallway, into the stairwell, down 3 flights. Behind them more footsteps, shouting, radio chatter. They reached the ground floor. Dante led Riven through a side exit into the parking garage. Kiana was waiting with a black SUV, engine running. Get in, she yelled. Dante shoved Riven into the back seat and climbed in after him. Kiana hit the gas before the door even closed. They peeled out of the garage, tires screeching. In the back seat, Riven clutched his belly, breathing hard. Where are we going? Safe house, Dante said. Secure location. No one knows about it. Riven nodded, still shaking. Kiana glanced in the rearview mirror. Boss, we've got a tail. Dante looked back, 2 black sedans, gaining fast. Lose them. Kiana swerved into traffic, cutting across 2 lanes. Horns blared, the sedans followed. Dante rolled down the window and leaned out, firing at the nearest vehicle. The windshield shattered. The car swerved and crashed into a parked truck. One down. The second sedan accelerated. It pulled alongside them. The passenger window rolled down. A gun barrel appeared. Down, Dante yelled. He pulled Riven to the floor just as bullets tore through the SUV's rear window. Glass exploded inward. Kiana jerked the wheel hard, slamming into the sedan. Metal crunched. The sedan lost control and spun out, crashing into a streetlight. Kiana didn't slow down. They drove for another 20 minutes, taking random turns, doubling back, ensuring no one followed. Finally, they arrived at a nondescript house on the edge of the suburbs. Quiet, isolated. Dante helped Riven out of the SUV. You're safe now. Riven looked at him, eyes red. For how long? Dante didn't answer. Inside, the house was sparse but functional. Bedroom, bathroom, kitchen. Dante led Riven to the bedroom. Rest, I'll be right outside. Riven sat on the edge of the bed. Dante. Dante turned. Why are you doing this? Dante met his eyes, because I never stopped. Riven's breath caught. Dante walked out and closed the door. In the living room, Kiana was on her laptop, tracking Blackridge's movements. They're pulling resources, calling in reinforcements. How long do we have? Maybe a day, maybe less. Dante's jaw clenched. Then we end this, tonight. Kiana looked up. How? Dante pulled out his phone and dialed a number. A voice answered. Who is this? Richard Calloway, Dante said. I have a deal for you. Will Dante's plan work, or has he just made the biggest mistake of his life? The warehouse smelled like oil and concrete. Dante stood in the center of the empty space, hands at his sides, waiting. Behind him, hidden in the shadows, Kiana and 3 operatives held position with rifles trained on the entrance. The plan was simple. Draw Calloway out, end this. Footsteps echoed. The warehouse door opened. Richard Calloway walked in, flanked by 6 armed men. He wore an expensive suit, perfectly tailored, and his expression was calm, confident. He stopped 10 feet from Dante. You called this meeting, Calloway said, so let's hear your offer. Dante's voice was steady. You want the baby, I want Riven left alone. Calloway smiled. Interesting, but why would I agree to anything when I can simply take what I want? Because I know where Caspian Vale's backup files are. Calloway's smile faltered. Impossible, there is no backup. There is, Caspian was paranoid. He created a second access point, not genetic, digital, and I have it. Calloway studied him. You're lying. Am I? Dante pulled a small USB drive from his pocket. This contains the encryption key, everything you've been searching for. Calloway's eyes locked onto the drive. Give me that and I'll walk away, Calloway said. Riven and the baby will never hear from us again. Dante held up the drive. First you leave, your men, your operation, all of it, shut down, permanently. Calloway's jaw tightened. That's not how this works. Then we have a problem. Calloway gestured to his men. They raised their weapons. Dante didn't move. Last chance, Calloway said. Give me the drive or I kill you and take it. Dante's voice was cold. You can try. Calloway nodded. His men fired. But Dante had already moved. He dove behind a concrete pillar as bullets tore through the air. Kiana and her team opened fire from the shadows, cutting down 3 of Calloway's men immediately. The remaining 3 scattered, taking cover. Dante rolled, came up firing, 2 more dropped. The last man turned to run. Kiana shot him in the leg. He went down screaming. Calloway stood alone, unarmed, eyes wide. Dante walked toward him slowly, gun raised. It's over. Calloway backed up, hands raised. Wait, we can negotiate. No. Dante fired once. The bullet hit Calloway in the shoulder. He collapsed, gasping. Dante crouched next to him. You threatened an Omega. You tried to take his child. You don't get to negotiate. Calloway wheezed. You can't stop us. Blackridge is bigger than me. They'll send more. Dante leaned closer. Let them try. He stood and walked away. Kiana approached. What about him? Call the feds, anonymous tip. They'll find enough evidence here to shut down Blackridge for good. Kiana nodded. Dante left the warehouse and drove back to the safe house. Inside, Riven was sitting on the couch, hands resting on his belly. He looked up as Dante entered. Is it over? Dante nodded. It's over. Riven's eyes filled with tears. He covered his face with his hands and sobbed. Relief, exhaustion, everything he'd been holding in for months. Dante sat down next to him. You're safe now, the baby's safe. Riven looked at him through tears. Why did you do all this? Dante's voice was quiet. Because you deserve to be protected, because that baby deserves a chance, and because, he paused, because I care about you. Riven's breath caught. They sat in silence for a long time. 4 weeks later. The hospital room was quieter this time. No chaos, no danger, just soft lights and steady monitors. Riven lay in the bed, exhausted but smiling. In his arms, a tiny baby boy wrapped in a blue blanket. The baby's eyes were closed, his breathing soft and even. Dante stood next to the bed, looking down at them. He's perfect, Riven whispered. Dante reached out and gently touched the baby's tiny hand. The baby's fingers curled around his. He is. Riven looked up at Dante. I'm naming him Elijah Vale Kade. Dante's eyes widened slightly. You don't have to. I want to, Riven's voice was firm. You saved us, both of us, you gave us a future. Dante's chest tightened. He leaned down and pressed a kiss to Riven's forehead. This pup will never pay for his father's sins. Riven's eyes filled with fresh tears. And for the first time in years, they were tears of joy. Outside the hospital, Kiana stood guard with a full security team, but the threats were gone. Blackridge had been dismantled. Calloway was in federal custody. The files were destroyed. The war was over. Inside, Dante sat in a chair next to Riven's bed, watching him sleep with baby Elijah cradled against his chest. And for the first time in his life, Dante Kade felt something he'd never allowed himself to feel. Peace. Because power without compassion was just violence, but power used to protect, that was love. And love was the most dangerous weapon of all. If this story inspired you, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss another story like this. Drop a comment below and tell us what you thought. Your words might inspire someone else today. Thank you for being here.